Yes. Test, test, test.
All right, good evening, everyone. Just to let you know, we're almost on time. Almost. It's Parliament time, you know. You always take this time. You always take your time to set up. We're just waiting for the last people to come in, and we're going to start in a couple of minutes. So, bear with us.
Sometimes we are in empty groups.
All right, everyone take a seat. We're going to start. Thank you everyone for being here and coming on a Tuesday night after the Easter break. I'm very pleased to see a filled room. Hello, Jeremy. We're also live on YouTube and Twitch right now, so also good evening to the people who are watching us online. And I'm very happy to have you all here to participate to this event on EU communication to young people. So first presentation, who am I? I'm Quentin Deschandelier. Probably you know me better as the MEP assistant, and I will be moderating tonight's discussions. Like the name implies, I used to be an assistant for an MEP in the European Parliament, and now I'm still a EU professional by day. I'm known for my memes and also for my Twitch channel, where I interview a lot of MEPs to talk about EU politics for young people. In short, I spent the last 10 years speaking about the EU, making it more relatable and understandable, whether through humor or my streams. So that's a bit who I am and my street cred on the issue. So as you probably all know, the next European elections are next year, in 1 year almost exactly. So I figured out that it would be the right moment to start talking about how to engage young people into EU politics and ultimately get them involved in the elections. To give you a bit of data, you know, it's an introduction, you always give data. In 2019, there was 50.6% of Europeans that came out to vote. That seems not very high, but that was actually the most participation the EU had since 1994, and that was the first time since 1979 that there was a progress in participation. And if we look at young voters, so 16 to 24-year-old, 42% of them came out to vote, up from 28% from 2014, which means that young people by themselves were the main factor in the progress of participation in the last EU election. So now the question is, how do we do even better than that? 10 years ago, it would have been unthinkable to see official EU communication being made with memes that will be properly unthinkable. And today we see MEPs, we see political groups, we see even the European Commission communicating with memes to try to make policy points more relatable for the public and particularly for young people. So tonight we will discuss with a great panel to see how we can improve things, what good practice exists, and how give some pointers maybe on how to talk to young people and make them interested in EU politics. So first, let me introduce you to my panel. First, with the co-organizer of this event, so 3 high-level MEPs from 3 different political groups. First, we have Teresa Reinke from Germany. She is the co-president of the Greens EFA group. We have Mohamed Shaim, who is one of the vice president of the Socialists and Democrats group. And finally, we have Marie-Pierre Vedren, who is the co-president of the French Renew Europe delegation. And first, I would like to thank all 3 of you, as well as your team, for making this event possible. We will also hear from 2 experts, so Anna Maria Duciak-Segesten, who is following us online, and Karim El-Alpesh. I will introduce them a bit in further details a bit later, but they will basically make us a short presentation about their area of expertise on to next issue. And after each discussion, we'll have a 10-15 minute discussion and ultimately a Q&A moment so that you can ask a question and also people online can ask their questions. I will have the difficult task to keep us on time because some of our guests have to leave at 8 and 8:15. So I want to be sure to be done with the main discussion by the time they are done and possibly have the opportunity to answer a couple of questions. But before so let's start. Before we start hearing from our guest, our first expert, I'd like to have a first state of play discussion with our MEP guest to see how they currently approach the issue of talking about EU politics to young people. So my first question is, as MEPs, what's your strategy to reach out, to engage young people? What is the feedback that you get from them, whether positive or negative? So, I don't know, Mrs. Vedren, do you want to start?
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for proposing this event. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to discuss with some colleagues on this important issue. Maybe just one word, because previously, before I became a member of European Parliament, I was the head of office of House of Europe. So my job was to communicate about European politics and to explain to citizens how does it work and how it's very important to work at the European level in order to tackle some issue. So since the beginning of my mandate, each week, I try to have time with young people. And young people, not only, I think that it's not a strategy, but I think it's our objective, not to consider people as voters, but to consider people as citizens. So I think it's first the first point. And after, also, to build a strong relationship between us and members of the European Parliament. In fact, since the beginning of my mandate, so I have each week an intervention with young people at school, not at school, in different exchange. And after, maybe, and I try to come with us in the European Parliament. And after, to continue to build a relationship with us, to really engage them in the process. Because I think that all the time, the questions they made, that they want to be considered. So for me, it's key to have a strong relation, not one time, but during all the mandate, in order to take into account their point of view.
Okay. And what about you, Mrs. Reinke? How do you approach the issue?
Well, first of all, also thanks from my side. I think it's really fantastic and to have all of you here. I was complaining before that I feel these rooms are always so confrontational in a way. So anyway, I'm very much looking forward to a more interactive debate. And I think also their face-to-face meetings are absolutely crucial, but whether it's digitally, face-to-face, or whatever kind of platform, I'm communicating with people, and then maybe more specifically with young people. I think that there may be certain lines I try to follow. And the first one is to be authentic. And this is something that I discussed a lot with my team about, because we are trying to maybe outsource some of the things that have to do with social media to my team. And I can tell you the feedback is very clearly when I do something myself, it works better because people can feel whether it was authentically written, whether it's a statement, whether it's something about me, or whether somebody else came up with it. The second point that I believe young people and also the rise in the participation in the last European election, I think, point to that young people really find important is value-based politics. So very often it doesn't need to be, or I feel the engagement is stronger when maybe it's not too technical. It can be very factual, but I think it should also maybe appeal to an emotion or a bigger political question. This is something where people really like to engage. And then the last point, and this is maybe something that I would also like to hear from you, and I think this is a big challenge that we have, is this question of how institutional you can explain something. Because I think that for a lot of people, and this is not only young people, it's pretty tricky to understand how legislation at the European level is being done. It takes very long, it's very complicated. So I think for me, sometimes it is more important to really communicate on the substance rather than, explaining exactly in what step of the process we are, because then people kind of lose maybe the frame, and then they are off and they are not following so much anymore. So I would say being authentic, value-based, emotional also to a certain extent, and then being rather on the substance than on institutional questions that are related to it.
And to finish, Mr. Scheim, what's your take?
Thank you, Mr. Map Assistant. I actually want to keep it like that, I actually don't like it that I see you. It would have been better to
I
keep
won't take it personally.
No, we had a conversation on Twitch. Sometimes it's good, to have this. Maybe Map Assistants should evolve in like a group of former Map Assistants that.
I'm just an ID.
Yeah, okay, very good. Second, so thank you for having me. Second compliment I want to give you: you are the youngest crowd that comes here voluntarily outside the European Youth Event as long as I've been MEP. So that's maybe we should also start there. Get younger people in the Parliament more often, because at the end of the day, politics is too important to leave to others. And it doesn't have to be simple, but I think young people, like people, tend to understand if we explain to them things in a simple way. And simple doesn't mean not complete. I mean, I've once had a professor in mathematics, and he said that people that cannot explain things in simple words just don't grasp fully the topic. And I mean, I'm not saying that I'm really good at that, because I struggle a lot of times with simplifying things. But it's all about messaging, and then getting at the. If you want to meet, let's say, fishermen, you go to the harbor. If you want to meet farmers, you go to a farm. If you go to the harbor to find farmers, then you're at the wrong place. So go to the places where young people are. Go to schools. Go to the right platforms. I mean, Facebook is basically old people. So if you want to meet young people, don't go Facebook. Go at least something else. I mean, I'm also not up to date, but I have good people in my family that are up to date. My son knows the right platforms. I feel like I'm really old, but he's 10. But he knows on which platforms to be. And I have a good team. And at the end of the day, I only do things that I like. If I enjoy them, sometimes I drop a crazy video on the internet, but just because I like it, and I had the biggest laugh about it, And then when people like it, that's almost like a bonus. Maybe that adds on to the authenticity comment by my colleague Thierry, but that's it. And whether I will succeed, that depends on next election. Then we will really know whether young people turn to vote, because it's very important, whether we succeed as all political groups, because this is not an individual responsibility. And then let's see whether that, I mean, there we can see the numbers. Last elections were improving compared to the one before that, and let's hope these figures rise. And for me, it's very important, and I hope that the Council accepts that we start voting for starting 16 years. Yeah. I mean, that would really be a game changer. It will get a lot of attention, because that's also very important, and a lot of attention. Then people will start reading about what we do, and then the turnout will be higher than hopefully last time.
So if I sum up, like listening to you, what I get from this is that it's important not only to have like one-off discussion, it's important to build a relationship with young people, so that in the end there's a link of trust, which links back to the idea of honesty. Young people see whether you are genuine or not, and ultimately, know what you're talking about and do what you like. Ultimately, that people will see it, and so they will be able to relate to all this. After this, so we hear like how you currently approach this. We know that for young people, one of the big way for them to inform themselves and to hear about politics is social media, and so we will hear, with a perfect transition, about our first expert, Anna Maria Ducek-Segesten. So she's online. She's from hello Anna Maria. So she's from the University of Lund in Sweden. She's a senior lecturer in European Studies and a reader in strategic communication. And she's worked quite a bit on the issue of political use of social media. So Anna Maria, the floor is yours for the next 8 minutes, let's say. What can you tell us about social media in politics? And then we'll have a bit of a discussion about that.
Thank you very much for having me remotely. And I will try to share my screen and a couple of slides to help us guide the conversation. So give me 2 seconds to the slide on. I hope you can see it. And as you already said, Quentin, the topic is social media and youth politics. And the question that I think I'll try to focus on this evening is, does social media use increase youth political participation? So the things that you noted before, can we say that they were due to some extent to social media? And if so, which practices can be considered very successful, and which risks can this social media participation may have? And because I think nobody has patience to too many details, I wanted to just give you some takeaways. And the main takeaway that you already kind of intuitively believe is that social media indeed are good pathways for youth political participation. Research is quite clear on that. However, not all platforms are equal. Also, social media demographics don't reflect the society as a whole. It's always very important to remember. There is a bias towards most ideological and committed voices in the society, even for the youth. And then there's some best communication practices. Some of them, some of these keywords have already been spoken by several MEPs before me: relevance, authenticity, and information load. But also some risks, which are what I would call speaking into the void, or speaking always to the already committed and not reaching outside the bubble. But let me, as I'm an academic, I'll enjoy a little bit of theoretical excursion here. I hope you join me along. So what is it that we think about when we think about social media and actual participation? There's 3 phases that we're involved in. One is this idea of information. The other one is participation. And the last one is this campaigning and ultimate representation, which we can see in this kind of what I would call a model, in which we have a latent phase, a mobilization phase, and a manifest phase. In the latent phase, it's all about this information. You got to read about political and social issues, and you get to discuss about these political and social issues. So it's kind of setting the groundwork, the foundation, the political interest and the political information, without necessarily focusing on the campaigning period. Like, it doesn't have to do with an election period necessarily. It has to do with general interest and information about the polity. Then, as we move towards a campaign moment or an election, there is this idea of political action and mobilization, calling on yourself and others to take political action, getting more and more activated. And then the focus, and the reason why I have this green arrow here, is because ultimately what we measure is not the latent and it's not the mobilization phase, but it's a lot in this manifest way. Where do we see political participation? And we see extra parliamentary politics in the form of protesting, this kind of street politics. And what we do want to see when we talk about the European elections is this idea of voting, donating either money or time for political causes, or also standing for office. And maybe that's also something that some of my previous speakers also referred to, this idea that we want to have youth not only as voters, but also as MEPs. Yeah, we want them to also represent the youth in this sense. So the scientific consensus is that there's political participation now has to be included to expanded to include digital action. So the things that I said before can be, so to say, in an offline setting, but they are equally valuable and equally effective forms of political participation in a digital way. And social media is an integral part of political participation along this continuum, if you want, in all these three phases. And I had more information about this, but I don't think that time really allows this. The social media has kind of a secret sauce, if you want, and it doesn't correspond to anything else. And that is a combination of this kind of big data, large information volume, the network diffusion, combined with algorithmic curation, algorithmic recommenders and moderation. And all these three elements combined can result in participation. And that's a unique property to social media. Perhaps we can talk about that more later. And I think I will skip this one in the interest of time, but what I do want to point out is this idea that there's a lot of volume, there's a lot of variety, there's a lot of speed, but most things on social media are not about politics. Research that is slightly older, but I don't think this has changed in the meantime, quote political information at about 10% of the overall social media content. However, any issue, it could be cultural, it could be economical, it could be social, can become politicized in a given context, yeah? But explicit connection to politics is little, and most social media users don't get involved with politics. Only the already committed are active, yeah? I also wanted to point out that because of this algorithmic curation I mentioned before, there is a low risk of echo chambers. Many more echo chambers exist in real life, so to say, in the face-to-face social relations than in digital social media relations. I wanted to present a statistical information from last year from gathered by Eurostat, so really specifically looking at the European data. And I wanted to emphasize my non-political use fact by looking here. Most popular use remain emails and instant messaging, this type of one-on-one communication or finding information about practical things. As you see here, the most popular uses. The least popular uses, which I hope you can see and follow these arrows, are exactly what we would wish to have more: expressing opinions on civic or political issues on websites and or social media, and have online consultations or voting to the civic and political issues. Yeah, very modest improvement here. So it's a good reminder that social media, while being effective, is obviously an acquired taste when it comes to politics. Also, as I said before, not also social media is created equal, especially when it comes to younger generations. We have this statistics, which is also as of October last year, and it only pertains to Western Europe, so it doesn't include what we would say Eastern European Union countries. But I think this is kind of a hint to what we already intuitively know. YouTube still seems to be the most popular platform, even for Gen Z users, but TikTok is definitely coming up from behind. It's also TikTok, the most downloaded social media app across the European Union. And we see here that there's a huge generational gap between millennials and Gen Z. Then we have Instagram coming up on a third as a video and picture platform, and all the way to the bottom we have this type of old platforms. I think this has already been mentioned, Facebook being for old people. The data speaks 1,000 words, right? 31% only use Facebook, and only 16% use Facebook Messenger compared to WhatsApp with a 69% data. Why this is relevant is not only because we want to be there, where the people are, but because also different platforms have different rules about political advertisements. I think I'll also go very quickly on this, but there's when we talk about campaigning, there's two ways in which you can do. You can look at it in terms of organic and paid content, paid meaning political ads, and then you can have information or mobilization, like calls to action. And some of the keywords that I would withdraw as associated with this type of communication have also partly been mentioned already: emotional, authentic, personal, but also, interestingly, especially when it comes to advertisement, targeted, customized, and data derived. And again, maybe we can talk more about this in the Q&A. So to almost wrap it up, what are the benefits on campaigning on social media? We have efficiency, like great use of the funds, which are always limited, quite quick and agile communication, integration between online and offline that is usually working very well. The risks is that in general, low response based on what I was saying before, dependency on social media platform ownership. We have seen a lot of discussion around Elon Musk and his takeover of Twitter and changing all sorts of details that can screw up things if you are a campaigner who wants to promote a certain mobilizing hashtag, for example. Also, a lot of discussion around TikTok and the connection with the Chinese state. We might also have risks of fragmentation of the demos that can be an after effect of micro-targeting. So what do we do about this? What are the solutions? I cannot claim to have all the solutions, but what we can at least discuss as potential solutions, and what I see promises in any way, is obviously to focus on resources. Like, we need to have a good amount of money and established strategies, this know-how, and also professional staff in order to obtain real good results. It's almost impossible to not have good resources along these three categories and nevertheless to be very successful. What I would advocate is also this type of holistic approaches to campaigning, multi-platform presence, and also combining online and offline activities. When we look at the European Union, we, I think, see that collaboration with local actors and emplacement of communication is very important. And finally, and I think also it's very important, not a lot of time to dig into the details, but we have to take into account the constraints that come from political structures, in the sense that when we deal with European politics, we have tiers of power. We have the supranational institutions and the power that lies within them, but we also have the mediating institutions that are in the national context. And we should not forget, when we have very ambitious cross-EU campaigns, that some of these will always necessarily be mediated through this kind of locality, this type of political structure. And maybe I stop here. I have a good EU level campaign example, but maybe we can talk more about that. And I also have a less successful example that I can also maybe have the chance to present to you in the Q&A. And also, for the sake of being an academic, I also have some further resources that I will invite you to consult if you want to know more. And I am stopping here in the interest of time, but I'm very much interested and looking forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Everyone, take note of the resources. You will be on the quiz on Monday. So thanks for this very interesting presentation. I will start not with the good and bad example, but with something that everyone has in mind here in Brussels, is the question of TikTok. You mentioned it. It's the fastest growing social media. There are 150 million users in Europe. It's very much used by young people. And as it happens, the European Parliament, as well as the other European institutions, have decided to ban TikTok from the official Parliament phone, Parliament computers, etc. So, and highly encourage the MEPs to not use it. So my question to the panel would be, can MEPs afford not to be on the fastest growing social media 1 year away from the elections? Anyone wants to take the lead on that, on that absolutely easy question? Mr. Shaim.
I just deleted my TikTok account. I was put under pressure by my team. I'm now thinking about maybe restoring it, but then put it on a different phone. Because, I mean, the problem is that I think security, I had it on my phone, and to be fair, at some point the parliament was blocking also Wi-Fi. You couldn't even use it, so that's why I just deleted it. But I was put under pressure, because also at some point it's a bit difficult. I mean, it's also regime-wise, I'm not like a big fan. You know what's happening to human rights conditions in the country. But I think at the end of the day, we also have to understand that you have to see what are the pros and what are the cons, and how you could maybe make use of it in a safe way to reach the people that you want to reach. Because at the end of the day, I think that's also important. Because if everyone goes away from the platform and you only keep like crazy people, then you also need people there to, get rid of the fake news, to promote progressiveness, to promote all the elements that, at least the pro-Europeanness that I would like to promote. And that's also, I think, a very important part of this issue. But yeah, so I think we cannot afford it, but at the same time, it has to be manageable. I mean, the spontaneity goes away if I have a different device for my TikTok. Then sometimes you do things because you feel it in the moment. I mean, if that phone is in the office or someone closed down, and then it also doesn't become really a good way to express yourself. Sometimes you're angry and you want to say something. I mean, if you cannot do it directly, then come on. But I mean, this is.
What about you, Mrs. Reinke? Because I know the Greens have always been very on the forefront of using social media. As a co-president, how do you tackle this issue, if you have managed to tackle it?
Well, to be honest, I have a TikTok account. We have right now suspended it, and I had already deleted the app quite a while ago from my phone, because if I'm being absolutely honest, the only social media platform that I really like is Twitter, which I know is only, I think, 36%, but I'm a Twitter girl, I can't help it. So for my own use, anyway, I wasn't really looking at it. But with how we are going to deal with the situation now, I'm really torn. And I was actually hoping to get some feedback also from you here in this room tonight, because I think in terms of it's a data machine for the Chinese government right now, and this is a massive political issue. On the other hand, exactly as you said, if you want to reach young people to vote, and in Germany, for example, for the next European election, it's the first time that 16 to 18-year-old people can vote, and of course, we want to reach out to them, because otherwise, you're right, the far right will be on TikTok. Yeah. But the Greens and the Liberals and the Social Democrats should be as well. So what is the take that we do, what are we going to do here? And I'm very in between. I mean, I deleted the app from my phone. I'm also now suspending my account. But I don't think that can be the final solution, at least in this very ad hoc situation. So I think we have to have a political discussion about how we deal with this, because right now I don't really have the golden solution.
And just before I pass the mic to Mrs. Vedran, quick poll. Who here has TikTok and use it? Raise your hand. Not very popular. Not a lot of Gen Z. Not a lot of Gen Z are in the parliament tonight.
Who has anonymous account?
Right, Mrs. Vedran, what's your take?
Me, personally, I don't have a TikTok account, but we have a lot of discussion with my team to be on TikTok, and we have, of course, a lot of discussion in you, and we are all agree, like my colleague said, that it's not possible to continue to promote this platform because we have political issue with China, with freedom of liberty, a lot of issue, and I know that some colleagues use two phones now in order to continue to be present in TikTok. Because, like we see, we have a lot of people who are in TikTok, especially young people. But all the time when I ask young citizens why they are on TikTok and what kind of information they look on TikTok, they talk about cooking recipe, about announcements of cinema, and all the time it was funny for me because I say, wow, I'm not very young now, because in my time we have Allociné, we have Marmiton, and so it's crazy to see, in fact, that they, like you explained, Anna Maria, they don't look a lot of political issue. So of course it's important to be present, because if we are not here, it's other people who defend exactly the contrary. But maybe I think we have other platform. Me, I'm more on Instagrammers. So maybe we can find a solution in order to tackle this issue. But now it's true that I think it's very important at this stage to ban TikTok in the parliament.
In the parliament. Anna Maria, I'm coming back to you regarding these examples. So you briefly mentioned that you have a positive example and a bad example. So very shortly, can you tell us like the good and the bad, let's say, in terms of EU communication on social media?
I don't even know if I want to have the time to share it, but one of my favorite examples is related to a celebration of Europe Day that was initiated by the representative of the European Commission in Catalonia, and that later was so popular that it got popular outside in the entire Spain, which was called the Beethoven a Casa, which invited people, regular users of Instagram and Twitter, to record themselves playing either the instrumental or the vocal part in the last movement of Ode to Joy, in honor of the European anthem. And that generated a lot of enthusiasm. There was also a prize, which was to attend in person a concert in the Palau de Música in Barcelona. And so that motivated the young people maybe as well, but it generated a lot of genuine enthusiasm, especially among young people who played an instrument and who saw this as a great opportunity to showcase their work. And in terms of the negative, again, I mean, I don't want to sound too harsh, but it seems to me that this particular example is not very successful because it doesn't have a very specific message, and that is the EU campaign. As some of you who are on Twitter may have seen it as well. It's a series of posters that represent various young people in various social circumstances, and they have a little heading with some, I don't know, I would call them like keywords and nothing more, like I don't know, democracy, or clean energy, human rights, solidarity. So it doesn't seem to me that it is very engaging, or it's very authentic, or very emotional. It seems relatively neutral and doesn't stir anything, or doesn't inform very much. It doesn't call for action in any way. So I wouldn't say that was very good. I have also like a bonus, which is a very nice collaboration, and we can also talk about that later on, but how EU and UEFA, the Union of European Football Associations, teamed up to protect the climate, to promote the EU Green Deal under the Make It Green label. And it was a short video, 33 seconds, that is very good. And of course, a lot of spillover effects. So another good thing would be to think about strategic collaborations and meet the young people where they are, for example, in the world of sports.
Thank you, Anna Maria.
Stop here, even though I could probably continue.
No, don't worry. We're going to stay on social media, but with another dimension, which is the topic of influencers. So we're going to go to Karim. So Karim Alpesh, he is a young Spanish YouTuber. He's actually the biggest Spanish-speaking YouTuber about EU politics, and he's going to tell us a bit about Well, how it came up to be, and what is it to talk about EU politics to young people? So, Karim, tell us everything in 5 minutes.
Well, hello. Can you listen to me well? Wait, this is better. Yeah. Hello? Now? Better? Yeah? Okay. Well, thanks for the introduction, for the invitation. Let's see. I don't know how much time I have in the end, but
Make it 5, and we'll stay in the Q&A out.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's going to be better. Okay, I'm going to make basically a short presentation of who I am, the project that I'm running, and what I'm doing basically in Brussels, because in the end everything is linked. I started specifically 5 years ago my YouTube channel today, so it's
really?
yeah, such a coincidence. I was thinking about that. Professionally speaking, yes, it's my birthday, let's say, because now I'm working fully on my YouTube project. That's what I have. I'm disseminating about the European Union, politics, and the European affairs, and culture, and so on, about Europe, not only about the EU, in YouTube. I'm doing that since now 5 years, and I'm also doing that in Twitch. Basically, what I'm doing in Twitch is, for example, is I'm taking the most interesting news or funny news, and I'm trying to make a summary of them and then to explain them to the audience, to chat, and to have that kind of interaction that you can have in a live streaming. In YouTube, basically, what I'm trying to do is to explain from how does the European Parliament work until the last trip of Macron and von der Leyen to China, for instance. I'm trying to explain what is the kind of relation that the EU would like, in principle, according to Macron, and I know there's some kind of debate today about that. But, well, trying to explain that shortly, always, and in a funny, entertaining way to the audience, because in the end, half of my audience is between 18 and 35, so I would say they are young people, and then the rest is over 35. So we'll have a big, let's say, audience, percentage of young people. And I started basically because I came here 5 years ago to start a Schumann trainship. And indeed, the first video that I recorded was here in the Parliament, trying to literally showing the Parliament, the corridors, the frames, trying to explain a little bit what the people were doing here. And from then to now, everything has changed regarding how I create the content. At the beginning, I was like really trying to replicate what the institution was doing, and then I realized that I shouldn't be doing that. People were expecting a person, and were expecting something more, not personal, but maybe in a more relaxed way, with no technical words, and also trying to meet me as a person, not only as a character that is telling you something about the EU. And trying to give something maybe interesting for the debate later. Here, some of you were talking about how to explain tough things, maybe like how to create laws in the EU, how that's affecting us, or maybe how the institution work. What I'm trying to do is not to explain that directly in a video. So now, if you enter to my YouTube channel, spam moment, you are not going to see videos like, how does the European Parliament work? Now what I'm doing is to pick, to select really common questions that people have, and not, sorry for this, but not this kind of people that we are here, because in the end we are a bubble, and that's the reality. But trying to go to the audience that are questioning things like, does the EU steal sovereignty for the countries? Should insert the name of a country leave the EU? Then, if you start with that question, you have the attention of everyone. I mean, everyone want to talk about that, and everyone have an opinion about that. So it's something really juicy for people to enter. Then that's the trap, because when you enter, now you have to learn what is sovereignty, you have to learn how the laws are created, because then you cannot talk about sovereignty if you really don't know how the Parliament and the Council and the Commission work for creating a law, directive or whatever. So that's the trap that I'm creating now, because in the end, it's true that you can have an opinion about everything, but if you really want to have a solid opinion or to enter into a discussion, to have something more than your own opinion, you need to know a little bit, at least, how these institutions work, and also things like define what is sovereignty, define what is a satellite country, when people are saying, oh, the EU is a satellite country of the US and so on. Okay, then let's define the concept, let's see the relations, and let's see if there's really some kind of external interference to talk about sovereignty or these kind of topics. So that's what I'm doing basically now, trying to take common questions and to give them an answer. And when doing that, you need to learn about the EU, yes or yes.
Thanks, Karin. To stay with you a bit, we know, and Maria mentioned that, social media always foster extreme reactions, whether they are positive or negative. How do you deal with the fact that since you have a young audience, you try to break out the bubble, so outside of Brussels, how do you deal with the extreme position on a positive or negative with the EU, and what would be your advice to MEPs and other people who want to talk about the EU to deal with it?
Well, normally I'm laughing about these things, but not like you're stupid, but you are saying something stupid, which is different. I'm thinking about the extremist things like, I don't know, this morning someone said, oh, you are paid by the parliament. So far, no. I don't know if today it's happening. Probably no. But so far, no. So it's like, if that's your only argument for not taking care to the video with, I guess, solid arguments and so on, that's all. I mean, you know nothing about me, you know nothing about my project, and you don't really want to know nothing about all this stuff. So it's like if someone on the streets suddenly bump on you and say like, I don't like your jacket. Okay, I mean, okay, it's another thing in life. Okay, life goes on. And when I have this kind of people, also I've learned that when you answer to them, when you reply to them politely and trying to explain again maybe something that they haven't understood or whatever, some of them, they react and they're like, okay, my question was serious or my comment was really genuine and I was thinking that, but now I will take a look again to the video with other eyes, let's say. I'm taking a Spanish expression, basically. But some people, they have that capacity for change, at least digitally, because then in person, no one is angry or extremist.
And so looking forward, I'm looking at the time, and I know that for some of our guests, they will have to go soon. Let's look to the next European election next year. Everyone here on this panel, what would be your wish for EU communication for young people for the next election? What would you want it to be? Who wants to start with this easy topic?
It's a very difficult question. I mean, I think we should. One of the biggest things I feel when I'm in Brussels and when I go back to a very small city in the Netherlands, Helmond, is there's a big difference in how people perceive the EU. People don't understand what we're doing and they don't understand how things work, and they're all and most of the times they don't either misinformed or they don't know the difference between the Council, the Commission, and Parliament. Very basic stuff. In the Netherlands, we have this joke that people know better how the President of the United States is elected than how politics in the EU works, because it is complicated. It's not that easy. But it doesn't mean that we should not continue trying to message. I mean, what our plans are for the EU in a clear, non-complicated way, and we should communicate to young people as we are communicating to old people. I mean, I didn't think we should change the message. Maybe the platform, as we've learned now, but not necessarily the message. I mean, the message should be clear for everyone. It doesn't matter from which age group you are, your education background, your gender, etc. I mean, we should try to be as active as possible. One element that this sometimes annoys me, and this is something that I tell myself first and then to others, we always start communicating very late. You know, 2 or 3 months before the elections, everyone is on Twitter, everyone is on Facebook. People are annoyed by all these ads. And one of the best things we do here in the Parliament is we're going to ban those ads, at least to target people. But everyone does it at the same time. And then it's very difficult to distinguish between all these annoying ads when you want to watch your YouTube video or you want to watch take whatever thing you do online. But continuously inform people and inform people at the right platforms. I mean, this is something that we should learn by doing and asking feedback, but at least get people involved. And one last element, getting people here in the parliament, inviting groups is not it's not the biggest deal of the world. But sometimes, but people like it when you invite them, and we as MEPs can invite, I think, 150 people a year, and then we start overcomplicating these invitations. I think inviting people here as much as possible and getting people here as much as we can is something that really could be good. But then for people from the Netherlands, it's easier than from Las Palmas or from Finland or from Sweden. But we should be open and inclusive for all Europeans, and this is something we should really fight for, not only during elections, but through the years, through the days.
Ms. Renke.
If I only have one wish, I think what is most important for me is that it's a communication that is relatable. Because I think that, even if then people think, okay, they do really weird stuff in the European Parliament and the European Union, if they feel that it's not them, but that it's us, this already really helps to, I think, well, maybe not cure one of the biggest problems that we have here, but at least help. Because for me, if I worked in the Bundestag before, and a lot of people find what they do in Berlin really crazy, but it's always an us that people are relating to. This is our parliament. Whereas I think the European Parliament is still seen as, these are people abroad that do stuff and they speak in different languages and it's far away. So for me, having relatable communication to young people, but also to all people, because at the end of the day, it's fantastic to have a lot of young people, and I'm very much looking forward to younger people being able to vote, but we want to have high voting turnout and a pro-European democratic vote across all age levels. And I'm doing something which I hate when politicians do it, because I'm missing the question round. I'm so sorry, but I have to leave. But I'm definitely going to force the others to tell me that all that you are discussing now, because I really need this TikTok question to be solved, okay? And also to get more ideas about how we should have a communication for the next European election that really works, because I think it would be really, really sad if after this great mobilization for 2019, we would have a voter turnout that goes down for 2024. I think it would send exactly the wrong signal. So having very good communication from the European level will be absolutely key. And sorry, I have to leave already. Have a great event still.
Thank you, Mrs. Renke. Mrs. Vedren, you're not off the hook.
Like Mohamed and like Terry said, I think it's very important to talk about the daily life of citizens, because sometimes, especially because we are focused on what's happened in our institution, we are more focused on political strategy, on the battle between the Council and the Commission. But for the citizens, especially for young people, it's not the key message. The key message is how we tackle the issue of the climate change, how we tackle the issue of democracy, how we tackle the issue of equality. So to really have strong communication about the daily life. Anna Maria talked about the campaign. When I go each week in my region, I see all in Montparnasse station. Of course, because I'm focused on Europe, I see all the time the European flag. But other people, I don't think that they see the European flag. So it's why I think also we need to work with local actors. Because Europe is not a question in Brussels. It's a question in all the country and in all the city, in rural area, in the neighborhood quarter. It's in each country. So we need to work with all the people and to understand that the European Union is one step in order to tackle all the issues, but talk about daily life, not about political aspects.
So, but yeah, this concept. The idea that we in Brussels decide things without coordinating or without member states being involved is like one of the biggest myths that politicians usually keep alive. Because especially politicians in member states, they love the fact that they can do whatever they want in Brussels, go back to the country, and then say Brussels has to. Brussels, we need to do this from Brussels, or we're not allowed to do this from Brussels. I always tell them Brussels is like looking in the mirror in the morning. Sometimes you like it, sometimes you don't, but it's you. It's you. That's nothing different. I mean, if you have a big pimple, try to get it away or try to shape up or whatever. But it's us. Brussels is not, let's say, the Adam Smith invisible hand deciding for us, and then this policy is taken by Brussels or Europe. Europe and Brussels cannot fight back, and I really hope that politicians become more vocal, that understand how it works, and counter this a lot of because sometimes when we hear them also on Twitter. I saw even MEPs last week sending tweets that the decision, it was a specific issue in the Netherlands, that the Commission went too far on this. And I was reading the letter and I was like, they just elaborate what was decided in 1992. I mean, not even, I was 7 years old at the time. Probably most of you weren't born, but he was just elaborating the decision. So how come, I mean, especially from a member of the European Parliament, it was from a specific political group, and I renamed the group to European Populist Party, because this is exactly what they were doing, and this is anti-Europe at the end. Because at the end of the day, this type of false criticism is not good for the picture that we're trying to build in not a federal Europe, but a Europe that works for every member state, that we try to solve problems that are needed to be solved on a collective matter. I mean, this is, I think, something why I think Europe has an added value, because the borders, the problems are too big for individual member states. That's why we do them together. But then don't go back to your member state and act as if this is a stupid decision decided by Brussels, and it's not good that this happened and we were not involved. I mean, this type of fake narrative should be harshly tried to change, also in campaigns.
Mm-hmm. And turning back to our experts, Anna Maria and Karim, on your end, if you wish if you could change something to next year's EU communication for the election, what would you change? Anna Maria, go ahead.
If it's me, I think my colleagues already said something. My predecessor has already hinted at some very important things. One is this idea of a longer perspective. Don't talk to people just around elections. This is usually not legitimate, because as I try to describe in my little process, political participation doesn't begin with the election. It actually ends. That's the end point. Yeah, we have this information gathering phase, this kind of getting used to the idea, getting information about politics, which precedes the election with a lot. Yeah, so the campaign to get out the information about the EU is, again, what the MEPs already have described, a part of the everyday life. And without that, there's no increase of turnout. So that's one thing. I'll be short, in point form. The other thing is to have very clear ideas. Who is doing what? Is it so that there is a European Parliament get out the vote campaign? Just raise awareness. There's the European elections coming up. Remember to vote. That's one type of campaign. And then we have the politicized campaigns that are driven by specific parties and specific candidates, and different candidates, basically different actors have different roles in this ecosystem. One is to get out the vote and raise awareness. The other, the more politicized, is to propagate or advocate a specific solution to some of the problems that were mentioned. And the third thing that I'll say also in this point form is this idea of, because of the nature of the EU that I think has been mentioned before, is that we need to kind of connect the supranational and the local without getting too messed up into the national, because the national will always filter it in its own strategic way, as been illustrated with the case of the Netherlands. So try to, I think, something that has worked very well in the 2019 election was this idea of micro-influencers, which I think Karim could also talk more about from an influencer practitioner point of view, but from an analytical point of view, collaborating with credible influencers has really given this aura of authenticity much more than the political messages by themselves. And if I have a little addenda, would be, I mean, I think micro-targeting does work. Especially when there's not a lot of, I think being able to direct your message to the right constituency and not necessarily localized, but as a type, like young people, for example, isolating the young people and creating specific content that is addressing the concerns of the young people, I think is actually a very good strategy. I stop here.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Karim, you have the last word, and then we start the Q&A.
Just for saying something different and to focus on some things that you have mentioned a little bit indirectly, I would say I would be really happy if for May 2024 we get all the EU population to know the difference between Europe and the EU as a concept. If we get that, I think we have done such a world. I mean, because then it's what you were saying. So when we talk about Brussels, it's not like Brussels, you know, a cloud that is above our heads, but we don't really know what is happening there. It's like, no, Brussels is another city, a city that has the parliament and so on. But the EU is not all the continent, and Europe is a different thing. So if we get to know the difference between these two concepts, and we get MEPs, we get journalists, we get influencers to talk properly using those concepts, I think we're making such a good step. Because when I moved here to Brussels, because I get the trainship, I'm coming from the south of Spain, so when I'm moving here, people were like, oh, you're going to Europe. What? I mean, what? I mean, I know we're the South, okay, we have this stigma, but we are in Europe. No, I mean, you're going to Brussels, to European Union. I was like, well, to Brussels, yes, the European Union. We're still the European Union, as far as I know. So these kind of concepts, I think, make some kind of barriers, psychological barriers to people to get used to talk about the European Union, or at least not to be scary when listening European Union or Europe or these concepts. So with this, I would say it's such a good step for humanity.
I'll take it. I'll take it. Thanks, Karim. All right, we've made it. Let's start now the Q&A. So I'm opening the floor to everyone in the room and also online. So if you have a question to anyone on the panel, raise your hand, introduce yourself, and ask. Sir, back there. And, sorry, just a second. Of course, people online ask a question through the chat. We'll keep an eye on it and we'll relay it. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. I think my question addresses the whole panel. I'm wondering, given that the last few minutes of the panel was spent primarily on figuring out how do we explain to people what the EU is, isn't there a bit of a tension in campaigning on social media, say, where there's like a relatively short amount of time that like you can grab someone's attention for, especially on TikTok, right? Because if you're spending all of this time campaigning on social media, explaining what the EU is, I wonder, is there any attention left to actually talk policy then? Because those may well be two very different things, right? You can explain, oh, sure, here's a council, and it's not the same as the other council, but like that's not the same as explaining, I don't know, say green policy or social democratic policy, right? How do you navigate that, or how do you anticipate you will navigate this in the upcoming election?
I mean, it's not a zero-sum game, eh? It's not like the one or the other. You can do both, I mean, at the same time. I mean, if it comes... I've been in politics for quite a long time. I started when I was 20. Local politics, and I can tell you, the number of hours you have to put into this job is crazy. The fact that colleagues, have the time to put things on social media sometimes amazes me, and then reply and react, and people respond. I get messages sometimes from people, and then in 5 minutes, oh, you're very cocky, you didn't reply. Come on, we get hundreds of messages, but somehow some of us are really good at it. I respect that, because the work that we're doing is already overwhelming, and people have usually dual lives. We have a life in Brussels and once a month in Strasbourg, and then we have our private lives that we try to maintain in the weekends, which is very complicated, I can tell you. But it doesn't have to be the one or the other. We do our work, And maybe because people are interested in a certain topic, you can also explain to them what role the EU can play. You know, sometimes if it works for them, it's also a way for them to, find this connection and then continue understanding, or reading or diving into the topic more or the concept more. Exactly what Karim said, that, you keep it light, you do, I mean, he was basically having a juicy channel, having these interesting titles for his videos with a question to clickbait them into his video, and then he's gonna educate them, which is, I think, also a good way to do both. Topic, policies, plus explaining the concepts. Because at some point, you need the concepts. If you, at some point, don't know the difference between the European, Council and the Council of Europe, I mean, then things become complicated.
I will maybe pitch into that, because I agree that it's not a zero-sum game. It's not one or the other. It's both, and it links back to the idea of making the EU like an everyday topic. Back when I was in Parliament, one of my MEP used to say, one of his punchline towards groups of visitors is like, Europe, it's every day. It's not once every 5 years. So, for instance, I make memes and I make serious Twitch interviews. My memes, I make jokes about the EU. My hope is that people will laugh about it, and then they will get interested in the concept, because even if they're not familiar with the intricacy of the council, of the parliament, etc., through humor they will get the idea, and then they will dig into it a bit further, and then once I get them on Twitch, we talk about actual policy. I get MEPs to come to talk about why this policy matters to them, what are the stakes, etc. But you can every day, let's say, give them a little something, a taste of what the EU is, to hook them, and then after that you can talk about policy. But it's not like you don't have to choose. Okay, am I going to be doing campaign only about policy, or am I going to do a campaign only about the EU as an idea? It's both. It's just that to get people to talk about policy, first you need to get them understanding, or at least interested in the wide, get their attention, whether it is through humor, whether it is through punchline, whatever the means is, everything is good to use. Let's say the ends justifies the means. I would say on that point.
If I may quickly intervene very quickly from the distance, is that this idea is actually interesting. This idea of politicizing EU. EU politics have been very technocratic, and I think the question from the audience reflected an interest in politicizing EU, like making it as not consensual but politicized, divided along lines that mobilize political interests both nationally and at the European level. And this definitely can work if we think just for the context of the European campaigns, making things like, what do we want? Do we want to have more or less of something? Do you want to have this measure or this other measure to promote whatever interest? Yeah. So having this kind of two sides of a story, like these are your alternatives, and it will generate concrete consequences, even if you don't understand exactly how. This idea that you have a concern and you can choose this alternative or this other alternative, and it will have a direct impact on your everyday life. I think this would definitely be a mobilizing strategy. So more politics rather than more consensus and technocratic discussion.
All right. I think there was a question there.
Here. Thank you. My name is Irina. I'm a trainee for an MP here in the Parliament. And before this period of life, I haven't been very knowledgeable about the EU, like in its depths. So my question is rather strange. It's a yes or no question. But was there ever in the history of the EU an integrated campaign when it comes to communicating the future elections? I mean, like throughout the member states. I mean, I know that every member is doing its part in communicating, and because personally I always found out about future elections via Facebook, because I'm in that category. For me, it wasn't something official that I found out on an official, not even on TV, but rather on a more personal level, so through friends. So yeah, thanks.
I mean, a yes or no question, but I cannot use those to answer this. I have no idea would be my question. It would be my answer.
I can answer this question if you want. Hello? I'm here.
I don't see.
Yes, please.
Hello.
Yes or no?
So my name is Rosa Nunes, and I work in DG Com of the Parliament. More specifically in the parliamentarium, but I've been in this business for quite a long time. So I can tell you that indeed there have been campaigns at supranational level organized by DG Com. The first one I think was in 2014. It was the Act, React, Impact campaign with several tools like videos on social media, maybe on television, but not that much at that time. So, and in 2019, it was the Together EU campaign, which was quite different, much more based on let's create a community, let's have people that know about the EU, young people, and want to talk to their fellows about the EU. So yeah, there are campaigns. There are the campaigns, of course, of the political groups. That's one thing. But then communicating about the institution, about what the parliament is, what it is compared to the two other big institutions. That has been done, and it's going to continue now for the next elections.
Thank you very much, DG Com, for helping us on that. We did remember the Act, React, Impact campaign, but I didn't know it was the first one, the first time. So yeah, there are EU-wide campaigns to help on communication around the elections.
Sadly, also have to do.
And sadly, Mrs. Shaim has to leave. But thank you again for being with us and having answered a few of the questions.
Yes, sorry. Maybe one last final comment. Never only focus on young people, because at some point you become old. And we also need you at the end to vote and keep on voting. That would be my final answer.
All right. Next question. Gentleman in the center.
Yeah, hi. Just wanted to say thank you to all the panelists. This was really interesting. So my question is sort of half a comment, half a question, really. I think you're in a really difficult, the European Parliament is in a really difficult situation when wanting to increase turnout, when wanting to increase interest in the elections because of the electoral system, right? Or Mr. Shahim mentioned that people know more about the US elections in Europe, and it's true, but it's because it's easy, right? Because you have sort of Biden against Trump, you have very, very clear figureheads for the sides, whereas with the electoral system we had with the Spitzenkandidaten thing didn't work out, transnational lists doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So I guess my question is, it would be a lot easier to get people interested if you could put a face to the groups, to the parties, those kinds of things. Even in elections in Europe, even though we don't have a presidential system, this is still something that does occur. You know who you're going to get if you vote for someone. So yeah, how do you do this without the electoral system allowing you to, I guess?
I mean, thank you for that. It's a very good point. It links back to the idea of relatability. One of the reasons when I started 10 years ago to become what became an MEP assistant was to let's say fight against the idea of the EU being this thing very far away, like a like mist. You know it's out there, but you don't really know where it is. And so what I wanted to do is say, okay, how can I put the EU back, let's say, in everyday life, or make it relatable. In the end, like back then I was doing memes about being an assistant in the parliament. I would say, okay, if people can see that other people in the parliament also have a boss that sometimes does weird stuff, assistants who have to struggle to do things, that help them say, okay, they're having the same problem as I have, so they are human beings. Then when I did the Twitch, I'm still doing the Twitch, the key point for me was to put faces, bring politicians to the foreground, allow people young people to directly interact with them, to ask their questions. So the EU has a face. It's not just Brussels, it's not just the Commission, it's not the Berlaymont, it's not the European Parliament. You have a face, you have someone who tells you, okay, I'm a politician, this is what I fight for, you agree, you don't agree with me, we discuss, but there is something concrete. It becomes human. It becomes political. So for me, this idea of relatability, the idea of putting a face on EU politics is fundamental. The Spitzenkandidat was an attempt to do that with various level of success. We know that the Council is not a big fan of it, to say the least. But yeah, I do agree that the idea of putting a face on the EU is fundamental, because otherwise, how can you relate to mist? You don't. You relate to humans and to policies and to things that impact people on a daily basis. Like I said, Europe is every day. It's not just once every 5 years. I don't know if one of you wants to add something.
Maybe we have an issue on the European election. In fact, it's the name of European election, but it's national. It's an addition of national election. If I focus on France, because in 2019 we changed the national scrutin. Now we have a unique circumscription. And so it's more easier to have national campaign, because previously we have different rural region, and in fact we don't have the possibility to completely engage people and to have a strong communication with this. So with this change, now I think it's a positive way in order to have implication of citizens. But you know the system of the Spitzenkandidat and other. In Brittany, when I talk, in fact, I don't talk about Spitzenkandidat. They don't understand what the Spitzenkandidat really changed for them. They don't, like I said, they don't want some change in their own daily life. If it is the Commission, the Parliament, the Council, it's not a question. They want, like I said, they want to tackle the issue, and to have a strong position at local level, national level, and European level. So it's why it's true that it's very difficult to campaign during the European election, but I think that now, with the change in France, it's a good example to have more engagement from citizens. But I think for the next election, it will be very difficult to engage citizens, but also to engage citizens with a pro-European voice. Because, like you mentioned during the different questions, when we talk about sovereignty, for some people, there is no European sovereignty. There is only national sovereignty. So, also to be focused on this area, it's also an opportunity to engage people in the European election. But it's true that the system is very complicated, but we have to work, of course, on social media, but we have also to engage media in general. Because Rosa talked about the campaign, React, and the other campaign, it's very difficult to engage media on this, to have a strong communication in media about Europe. Because when you discuss with French, for example, journalists, they say, oh no, European issue, it's so complicated, it's so boring. It's always the same case. So we have to change and to demonstrate that it's not boring, because it's a question of daily life, and it's a question of all the issue. Climate, when they are focused, for example, on climate change, they are focused at National Assembly on the different law on this issue, but we know here that it's very important to act at the European level. So maybe also to work on another step, it's also very important in order to change after the implication during the European campaign.
I will, before going back to take another question, I will take a question online because, like I said, we're live on YouTube and Twitch, so it's only fair that we take also questions from them. So I will read out the question. So Paul is asking, let's be honest, the EU suffers from a huge democratic deficit. I feel like the question is not really about how to communicate to young people, but really how do we involve young people in EU politics? How can we progress on this in the status quo where even the EP lacks formal powers? So how do we involve young people in EU politics, despite the fact that Parliament, it's true, is not the strongest institution in the EU? Karim, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll do it shortly. I think it's a really good question, to be honest, and it's a really common opinion and question at the end people have. I would say that, and probably we're going to all agree on this, what we need to have mandatorily is subject in schools, in high schools, at least for us to know what the hell is the European Union, why we are paying to people here, why all this is working, and if it should work in one way or in another way. But again, for creating this, for solving these kind of questions, first of all, we need to know what is happening. So I would say we need to start in the schools, and then if we have something extra, and as extra, I would say program in TV, radios, influencers talking about European politics, European Union stuff specifically. That's going to be great. That's going to create more opportunities, more chances for people to be aware of what's happening here and then to understand more. If we need more, if we would like to give more powers to the Parliament or no, why some people say the EU is not democratic, why others defend the opposite. So I would say go to the schools, go to the TV, go to YouTube, Twitch, and that's key.
Maybe, of course, we are focused this evening on EU politics, but more generally, I think we have the issue with young people in politics in general and the trust in politics. So I think it's also a big issue to work on trust. Like you said, it's a different way to engage at school, on social media. But to really push citizens, especially young people, to be engaged. Because when I have discussion with young people, especially at school level, they talk about China, they talk about the Uyghurs, they talk about a lot of things. And you know, sometimes with other people and other MEPs, they always question the engagement of young people. But in fact, when you have discussion with young people, they are very carried out of different issues. But they are not engaged at political level, but maybe in different associations. So first, I think we need to work on political in general, and of course at the European level, but in general in politics.
Just to
if
close
I may
on.
quickly add something,
go ahead.
very like a number. In terms of the young people being actively involved in European politics, they are more involved in European politics than in national politics, because the average age of the European member of the parliament is lower, so people are younger as MEPs than in a majority of the European national parliaments. Yes, this is the interesting fact. The European Parliament is much more mobile. 61% of the MEPs are new to the Parliament. They're not there forever. You know, there's some people in national parliaments that they have entered when they are 30 and they exit when they die. So this is not the case for the European Parliament. The youngest MEP is 21 years of age, and the average age is 49 years of age in the European Parliament, which is definitely younger than a majority of European national parliaments. So it's not looking as as difficult as you described. And basically, we have a problem with European national and supranational youth engagement. But European Parliament is better at recruiting younger votes and younger candidates compared to national. It's also important to keep in mind.
I would say that there is also like not a fatality, let's say, in young people being uninterested in politics and EU politics and all that. Like I will give you a French example. So you know probably that in France there is a very controversial pension reform going on, to say the least. And as it happens, months ago when there was the vote happening in the National Assembly, so very important month for European politics. Actually, on Twitch, there was a channel that is dedicated to politics. Jean Massier, the channel of Jean Massier. He made a stream following the vote, the debates on this reform. So very like purely politics, MPs talking in the National Assembly, making speeches. He made an entire afternoon about that, commenting, following the debates. This stream, which you would say, but that will not interest people, not young people. They don't care about what MPs are saying in the National Assembly. Guess what? This stream for the entire afternoon was the biggest stream in the world on Twitch. It reached 91,000 young people following it live, and over the entire afternoon, 500,000 people came on the stream to follow this debate on Twitch, and most of them being young people. So there is no facility in interesting people in politics, getting them to following live parliamentary debates in the National Assembly. So there's no reason why we would not be able to do that at European level. There are challenges for sure, because you need to make people understand what is the EU, what are the changes, etc. But for me, this example is the confirmation of something I'm convinced, is that there is no fatality. You can get young people to get involved, to get engaged and get interested in these things. And for me, that's my dream would be to manage to do something like that at EU level. Let's take a couple more questions, and then I think we're going to go in. Anyway, we're going to lose the room. So we have 2 more questions, and then we're going to. Rosa.
Yes. My question is for the lady specialized in social media, whose name I forgot. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to hear you a little bit on the metaverse. The metaverse, we know that it's mostly the Z generation interested in that. In 1 year time, some of the people from that generation will be in a position to vote, because in some countries the vote age has been set at 16 years old. So do you think that it could become in the future a communication tool towards that generation? Or
Thank you very much for the question. To be very fair, I don't like the short answer is not in the near future. I don't think so. And the metaverse was a big idea that was mostly a top-down idea, promoted not from the bottom up, but more from the platform owners and platform, let's call it visionaries, down. So I don't necessarily think that it's that part of technology that will be the next step necessarily. I do think, though, that technology will play a transformative role for communication, but I'm thinking mostly for this generative AI, the so-called chat GPT that I'm sure most people in the room are familiar with as one incarnation of this generative AI. I think campaign makers will benefit very much from this technology, and I don't think we will be able to compete in this space without recruiting the help of this technology. So those campaigners that will be able to maximize the efficient use of both text, video, and image generation with artificial intelligence technologies will have a competitive edge. That's more what I think the technological front is going. Not metaverse.
All right, final question, gentleman at the back.
Okay, I'm trying to formulate as a question something that's more of a reflection of mine. I'm a political activist, a member of a party back home. And one of the things that strikes me is the fact that activists in political parties, most of us focus on national politics, and it is indeed very rare to find people being interested in European politics and European policy. And political parties play a role, a social role, in a way, through what used to be called popular education, activist or daily factors for educating their fellows, educating citizens, educating their families and friends. And the fact that we have, at least in my country, I don't know about yours, such a deficit in the ability of people who actually are interested and involved in politics to know about the EU and therefore to share this knowledge with others, I think should be a point of questioning, because we're talking about the way to talk and communicate Europe towards people. And part of it is a manpower issue, the fact that we lack a big number of people who know at least a bit what they're talking about when they talk about the Europe and have the ability to convey this knowledge to others. I would have said yes, I would have asked the question to all the MEPs present. There is one left, thank you, Madam Verdun. But I guess it is a question for you then, as an elected official working with activists in your party, if you think this dimension plays a role in our ability to communicate the EU towards the people.
So I not engage all the colleagues, and I will speak very from my point of view and my perspective. And like I said all the time, I think that how we engage during our mandate and how we create link with citizens, it's completely proper for each MEPs. And also the link and the notion of activism. So I think it's completely different if you have this discussion with the MEP in some party than Renew Party and the French majority in France. So it's why I think it's a very young specificity. So, of course, if we want to have a strong commitment especially from young people in European politics, of course we need to send a strong message and to act like activists. But for me, especially with maybe my own career and with my own study, it's not like this and like that I want to have my mandate. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's completely personal. So it's why I'm not sure that there is a right or wrong response on your question. So it's why, in fact, I don't have a response of your question. Because, like I said, I think it's completely different when you are in the green group, if you are in the grey group, or if you are part also on the majority at national level. If you are also in the opposition or in the majority in the country, your action is also different. And you have to take into account this point. So it's why it's quite difficult for me to answer.
All right, I'm being generous, gentlemen. Really final question, in short, please.
Just really quick. So, because we mentioned TikTok in the beginning, and and I also saw in the nice presentation from our speaker from Connecting Remotely that especially in Western Europe, people don't use basically Telegram, and Telegram, while TikTok was shunned here rightfully, that it's a vehicle by the or it's used to harvest data. It's a harvest data machine from the Chinese government. It's interesting that Telegram has quite an opposite role, especially where it is used, although we are not entirely sure whether they actually share their code with the Kremlin or not. But like, this is a different debate, maybe for another time. But it left me to think that indeed maybe this is one idea, or of how to approach this and how to like counter the TikTok debate, or as an example, or even, I don't know, maybe have a public social media. And I don't know what especially already I hear some nodding, but what especially our streamer friend would think about this, because it's and also any one of you two who are like in Twitch, because you are you're also monetizing from it, I assume. And so I don't know, and also our remote participant, I don't know if they have want to say anything on this and the role of Telegram as maybe an example, a better one that could be used instead of TikTok, or maybe a public social media that just uses the functioning of TikTok. And I think this is what I wanted to say.
Karim, you want to start?
Yeah. I'll make it shortly, because I think maybe, Ana Maria, you have to say interesting things here. But if I'm not wrong, it was maybe 1 year ago that I read that the European Union was planning to make the, what was the name? Like EU Voice or EU Video, something like that, like a platform trying to make something similar to Mastodon, where people were running away when Twitter was taken by Elon Musk, and also EU Voice that would work similarly to YouTube. In the end, at least for me as a creator, the main problem that we usually have is that at least I don't feel the difference of working in a platform that is ruled by the US or by Russia or by China, but having contact with the people working the platform. So when I'm having a problem, I cannot knock on a door like when working physically in an office. So for me, the most important thing is for them to fulfill, obviously, the law, first of all, and that they are not compiling data and all this stuff, but that we have good communication with them, open communication for us, because in the end we are the workers also for the platforms. So for me, that would be the focus.
And if I may intervene, thank you. I think it's also a very interesting perspective, Karim, to see it from the, like, it doesn't maybe matter so much as long as the platform themselves are open and cooperative. There's many things to discuss, but I will pick up on maybe two things. One is this idea of public social media. This has been a darling of many idealists. I could say that there's been a dream, and we've had many attempts at creating what is known as public deliberative platforms. Actually, there's probably the first and most successful one is created in Barcelona, but it's actually now all over the European continent, maybe even exported outside. It's called Decidem. And it is a very locally in place deliberation platform that has specific structures that promote deliberative content, argued, reasoned interaction. Now, I think that this public social media platform is a ideal type, and I don't think it is possible to generate this either top-down, like created by the EU, created by a national state, created by any particular institutional authority, that is not commercial. And I don't think it's going to be necessarily something that is from the bottom up either, which kind of shows what is happening with Mastodon right now in contrast to Twitter. And that goes back to one of my slides in my presentation, which is the fact that politics is incidental on social media in general. Social media is so powerful because of the critical mass of participants. We have large data volumes that are generated in form of data traces by billions of people around the world. And we also have these network effects that people, I think, in the room are more familiar, so I'm not going to go into discussing too much, but this is a critical mass. Without this critical mass, there is no interest in communicating politics on social media or communicating anything on social media. The power of social media is in a large network that continuously generates data. So a public social media that would be dedicated to serious matter, to politics, or to reasoned content, unfortunately, is not what people want. And I don't want to sound elitistic or remote or kind of lecturing, should have it or whatnot. No, I think we don't have room in our lives of hardworking people with this type of reasoned extra work for a majority of the people that live regular lives and are not, super involved in activistic politics. People participate on social media because they want most of the time some information and some entertainment. One of the reasons, just to bring an example, one of the reasons most people know about American politics, as one of the MEPs already jokingly referred to, is because American politics is a spectacle. Donald Trump is a meme generator in himself, right? He's an entertainer. He's a former wrestling presenter on television. He's a he's a host of a TV show. He brought into politics this entertainment value. And this is why people watch him. And I from Sweden, you guys from across Europe and outside, recognize him and recognize his message. We laugh at it, but we still know about it. We're serious politicians that engage with the matter very factually and thoroughly and consistently are not getting this type of publicity because, let's put it in a simple terms, they are not entertaining. Politics as entertainment is what generates this type of social media interest. Serious politics that really affects people's lives in a how can I say, in a consistent and responsible way is not entertaining. You have to be interested in politics. You have to understand and dedicate time to this. It takes mental energy. It takes time. It takes dedication. It takes ideological commitment from some at least. And that's not something that a majority can do all the time. And that's why this idea of incidental exposure or politics in third spaces in academic terms, like you go online for social media and entertainment, but you come across some political statement that can actually speak to you and to your context and to your everyday problems is important. It's much more difficult to attract people to a specifically dedicated political space. Very, very few people, maybe the people in the room, maybe myself as a politically minded academic would do it. But I don't think that my mother, who is a very respectable voter otherwise, would dedicate her time to getting on this politically only platform. I hope I did not bring a negative vibe, but I think this is kind of the reality of what we see when we look at the motivations of people's engagement online.
Thank you, Anna Maria. And on this note, I will close the event. I very much thank you all for being there. Thank again my guests on the panel for attending. I hope that you found the event interesting. It's just the beginning of the conversation. As we say here in Brussels, we have 1 year to do better when it comes to communication in general, and particularly to communication towards young people. So I wish you all a good evening. We can continue the conversation a bit, whether here or outside the Parliament. We can go have a drink to decompress a bit. I want to thank you all again and see you next time.